Hi, welcome to Chapter 12 on identity and subgroups. In this particular PowerPoint, we will be focusing on language of subgroups, and then also we'll focus on sexual orientation as a subgroup within a culture.
So remember we studied subgroups back in Chapter 1 earlier in the semester. We looked at how subgroups pose similar communication dynamics as different cultures. They're usually a subgroup is characterized by identifiable distinction and shared interests and values. Are you a member of a subgroup? A lot of times occupation, values of behavior would be considered a subgroup, a nurse or a physician. A subgroup tends to dress alike. They're dependent on a dominant culture. A subgroup is dependent on a dominant culture, but they're a group within that dominant culture. Argo, and let me pull this down here for you. There we go. You can see that a little bit better. Argo is the specialized language of subgroups. The specialized language of subgroups, Argo. Argo is an important aspect of a group identity. It defines the boundaries of a subgroup, and it has specific, clear-cut meaning for that subgroup. Let's think about what Argo is. It's language within that. So teenagers, sometimes we say, have their own language, right? If you ever have been in prison or visited a prison, you will notice that prisoners have their own language, Argo. It also could be broken down into three areas, Argo, which is jargon, cant, and slang. Jargon is the technical language of professional groups. Again, think about the military. Think about those who work on computers, those who work in the healthcare industry. That's the specialized language of that particular subgroup or that professional group. Cant is specialized language of non-professional groups. For instance, those who drive truckers are considered a non-professional group, but they have their own language. And slang is specialized language of stigmatized groups. Okay, this would be, it could be teenagers because they might be stigmatized, but gangs, those who are in gangs, drug dealers, prisoners, is considered slang. Argo. Subgroups and media and values. Okay, how media use and values contribute to defining subgroup identity and boundaries. How do subgroups use the media and social media? Social media has become important to help contribute to the interaction of subgroups and shared identity. Sometimes it could be used as in a sense that, I'm an outcast, you're an outcast, so we're going to get together and be outcasts and be part of the subgroup. Or it could be, in a sense, I'm part of the subgroup, and it sets a guiding value and pattern of behavior. The media does. You learn from the media, or you share and communicate among the members of the subgroup through social media. It brings in group cohesiveness and membership identity. So social media has been becoming very important in subgroups in helping to maintain the strong interaction. Okay, we're going to be looking at examples of subgroups. We're going to be looking at three in particular from your textbook: the working class, corporate cultures, and sexual orientation as a subgroup. And how this information was gained through participant observer, being a participant observer in research. The reports are based on the researcher's orderly and scientific study of the subgroup and actually becoming a member, becoming accepted into that particular subgroup. Please be aware, and I'm sure you watched the video of the working class that's considered a subgroup in our culture, and how our media portrays the working class as individuals. The values include, within this subgroup, a high value on loyalty to one's community. Those who belong to this subgroup believe that they lack a sense of entitlement or privilege. They're not privileged. Those other people are privileged, in a sense, of folks who belong to this subgroup. And there's a shared resentment of perceived arrogance in the wealthier classes. Participation in social media is significantly less within the working class subgroup. Corporate cultures, 80s, it was a buzzword, and Southwest Airlines, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, they were famous for their different approach to corporate culture. No longer was it traditional to wear a suit and tie. You had more casual Fridays. You had directors of fun. You had people going around giving neck massages, in a sense that you're all part of a team, of a family, and you believe in what you do. But it was an 80s buzzword as far as the corporate culture is the way we do things around here. It's a set of values, goals, and priorities that are encouraged throughout the policies and procedures of the organizations. Elements of culture as symbols, heroes, myth, rituals, and values can be cultivated in a corporate atmosphere. Okay, and you can watch this YouTube video. If it doesn't pop up on your video, you can plug in this address in your browser and learn more about corporate cultures. Okay, sexual orientation. Let me pull this down for you. As a basis for subgroups, okay? And what we're looking at here is the term othering, okay? Remember, othering is degrading another culture that is outside of one's culture, and othering can be applied to subgroups, such as one's sexual orientation, as it does with other subcultures. So there could be a sense of othering with sexual orientation. Language is used to determine one's gender identity and sexual orientation, and this has changed over time. Let me give you a piece of history here. A turning point in the gay and lesbian identity was on June 28th, 1969, when there was a riot at Stonewall, which is a gay bar, in New York's Greenwich Village. Here, at this time, now remember this is 1969, the patrons fought back in this historic police raid of the bar. Previous to that, people might have been hidden. And after this historic event in 1969, it was okay to be gay. And at that point, sexual orientation started to come about. And you see on your PowerPoint, word symbols are given positive meanings, such as the use of faggot and dyke as designated words. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not acceptable to use this language to refer to another person. But these words have now become the symbols of gay pride. If you ever experience a gay parade, gay pride parade in San Francisco or New York City or any type of city, you will see these words, and they're used in a sense to identify oneself in this particular venue. Nonverbal symbols facilitate group identification as well. Hitler's, and let me pull this down for you, pink triangle used to label homosexuals in Hitler's concentration camp is now used again as a nonverbal symbol. The term queer theory, and this is a field of critical theory, and it emerged in the early 1990s out of the fields of women's studies and queer studies. And what queer theory does is it challenges the idea of a single identity and rejects the categorization of heterosexuality and homosexuality. In other words, we should not be defined by the sexual acts or the sexual orientation that we engage in. That's what queer theory states. Like, for instance, right now we have one label for sexual behavior between opposite sexes, heterosexual. However, there's lots of labels for non-heterosexuals. We have gay, we have lesbian, we have transgender, we have queer, we have bisexual. So what queer theory is challenging is the idea that we just have a single identity, okay? To put sexual orientation into a category, just a single identity of oneself, okay? Rather than say, I'm heterosexual or I'm homosexual. It just says to challenge the idea of our society to put it into a single identity. Hofstede, remember our great researcher, and when he looked at masculine and feminine cultures, that the masculine culture dimension is negatively related to the acceptance of homosexuality. Homosexuality tends to be perceived as a threat in masculine cultures and a fact of life in feminine cultures. And you can look back to see what are considered feminine cultures and what are considered masculine cultures. In some African countries, homosexuality is illegal. And among the consequences of othering are the potential for emotional and physical harm to those being labeled. Also, it has the ability to create community. So be aware of othering and obviously the term homophobia, the irrational fear of gay men and lesbians. And let me pull this up for you here. The integration or accommodation of subgroups, okay, for instance with sexual orientation, cultural separation occurs only when a society stigmatizes a group, okay? So as long as a society in some way stigmatizes gay men and lesbian, a separate culture will exist. So as long as it's stigmatized. Harris wrote, if gay men and lesbians became too mainstream, then the term or the meaning of gay would be lost. So rather than accommodation, gays focus on integration, acceptance for people of who they are, as they are, okay? So rather than accommodating, okay, gays would want to be accepted, want to focus on integration and be accepted for the people of who they are. Okay. Well, that finishes our chapter on 14, where we looked at identity and subgroups. We looked at the language of subgroups, argot and cant and jargon and slang. We looked at, in particular, the subgroups from your textbook of the working class, of corporate culture, and sexual orientation as a subgroup.